The bright lights of the grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel made everything look like a dream. Rich people in expensive clothes walked around with wine glasses in their hands. The women wore beautiful dresses that cost more money than most people made in a year. The men had on perfect suits and shiny shoes. Everyone talked quietly and smiled at each other like they were old friends. Marcus Whitmore stood near the big black piano on the stage. He had just finished playing 3 songs for the charity event. People clapped loudly for him. They said things like wonderful and amazing as they walked by. Marcus loved hearing these words. He was one of the most famous piano players in the world. People paid thousands of dollars just to hear him play. Marcus was 42 years old and had been playing piano since he was 4. His parents were rich and sent him to the best music schools. He had won many awards and played in the biggest concert halls around the world. Tonight he was playing for free because it was a charity event. But he still liked the attention and praise from all the wealthy people. The charity event was to raise money for sick children. Many important people came to give money and feel good about helping others. The tickets cost $5,000 each. Only the richest people in New York City could afford to come. Marcus looked at all of them and felt proud to be part of their world. As Marcus walked down from the stage, many people came up to talk to him. A woman with diamonds around her neck told him his playing made her cry. A man in an expensive suit said Marcus was the best piano player he had ever heard. Marcus smiled and thanked them all. He felt very important and special. The room was huge, with gold decorations on the walls and crystal lights hanging from the ceiling. Round tables with white cloths were set up around the room. Each table had beautiful flowers in the center. The food was fancy and expensive. Everything was perfect for the rich guests. But Marcus noticed something that did not belong. Near the back of the room, close to the doors that led to the kitchen, stood a small boy. The boy looked about 12 years old. He wore old jeans with holes in the knees and a t-shirt that was too big for him. His shoes looked worn out and dirty. His black hair needed to be cut, and his face looked tired. The boy was not moving around like the other people. He just stood there looking at the piano on the stage. His eyes were wide, and he seemed to forget about everything else around him. He looked like he had never seen anything so beautiful before. Marcus wondered what this poor boy was doing at such an expensive event. The boy clearly did not belong here with all these rich people. Then Marcus saw a woman in a white uniform come out of the kitchen. She was carrying a tray of fancy food. The woman looked at the boy and made a quick hand signal. She was telling him to stay where he was and not move around. Marcus understood now. The boy must be the son of one of the workers. His mother was probably working in the kitchen or serving food to the guests. The boy had to stay quiet and out of the way while his mother worked. Marcus watched the boy for a few more minutes. The child never looked away from the piano. Even when people walked in front of him or talked loudly nearby, the boy kept staring at the musical instrument. There was something about the way he looked at the piano that was different. It was not just curiosity. It looked like love. This made Marcus feel annoyed. He did not like seeing this poor boy at such a fancy event. The boy made the elegant room look less perfect. His old clothes and messy hair did not match the beautiful setting. Marcus thought the boy should be hidden in the kitchen with his mother, not out here where the important guests could see him. Marcus had always believed that beautiful things like classical music and fancy events were meant for people who could afford them. People who were educated and cultured and rich. Poor people like this boy and his mother were meant to serve the rich people, not enjoy the same things they enjoyed. The more Marcus looked at the boy, the more irritated he became. The child was ruining the perfect atmosphere of the evening. All these wealthy people had paid good money to have a wonderful time at an elegant event. They should not have to see poor people and be reminded that not everyone was as lucky as they were. Marcus decided he needed to do something about this situation. He was an important person at this event. People looked up to him and respected him. He should teach this boy a lesson about staying in his proper place. An idea started forming in Marcus's mind. It was not a nice idea, but it made him smile. He could have some fun with this situation and make the boy understand where he belonged. At the same time, he could entertain the wealthy guests with a little joke. Marcus began walking toward the boy. As he moved across the room, some of the guests noticed and started following him. They were curious about what the famous piano player was going to do. The boy was still staring at the piano when Marcus reached him. Up close, Marcus could see that the boy's clothes were not just old, they were also clean. Someone had tried to make them look as nice as possible. The boy's face was clean too, and his hair was combed even though it needed to be cut. Marcus cleared his throat loudly. The boy looked up at him with big dark eyes. There was no fear in the boy's face, just surprise. He had not expected the famous piano player to notice him. "Well, well," Marcus said in a loud voice that other people could hear. "What do we have here?" More guests started gathering around to see what was happening. They formed a small circle around Marcus and the boy. Everyone was smiling, expecting to be entertained by whatever the famous musician was planning to do. The boy looked around at all the rich people staring at him. His face started to turn red, but he did not try to run away. He just stood there, quietly, waiting to see what would happen next. Marcus felt very pleased with himself. This was going to be perfect. Marcus looked down at the boy with a big smile on his face. But it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who was about to do something mean. The rich people around them waited to see what would happen. They were all smiling too, thinking they were about to see something funny. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus said in his loud, clear voice, "I believe we have discovered our next performer for the evening." The wealthy guests laughed softly. They thought Marcus was making a joke. The boy in his old clothes looked so different from the elegant people around him. The idea of him performing at such a fancy event seemed impossible. Marcus put his hand on the boy's shoulder. The boy looked up at him with confusion in his eyes. He did not understand what was happening or why all these people were looking at him. "Tell me, young man," Marcus said, still speaking loudly so everyone could hear. "What is your name?" The boy's voice was very quiet when he answered. "Danny," he said. "Danny Martinez." "Well, Danny Martinez," Marcus continued, "I noticed you staring at my piano. You seemed very interested in it. Do you play piano?" Danny shook his head quickly. "No, sir," he said. "I just like to listen to music." Marcus's smile got bigger. This was working out even better than he had planned. The boy did not even know how to play piano. This would make the joke even more entertaining for the guests. "Oh, but I think you are being modest," Marcus said. "I saw the way you were looking at that piano. You looked like you were in love with it. Surely someone who loves music so much must know how to play." The people around them laughed again. They were enjoying this show that Marcus was putting on. They thought it was clever and funny. None of them seemed to notice that the boy was getting more and more uncomfortable. Danny's face was getting redder. He could feel all the eyes on him. These people were all so fancy and important, and he was just a poor kid whose mother worked in the kitchen. He wanted to disappear, but there were too many people around him. He could not escape. "I really don't know how to play, sir," Danny said again. His voice was even quieter now. Marcus pretended to look surprised. "What? A young music lover who cannot play piano? This is terrible. We must fix this right away." Marcus turned to face the crowd of wealthy guests. "My friends," he announced, "I have an idea. Why don't we give young Danny here a chance to play for us? I'm sure he is just being shy about his abilities." The guests clapped their hands and said things like, "What a wonderful idea!" and "How exciting!" They were all looking forward to seeing what would happen when the poor boy tried to play the expensive piano. Danny's eyes got very wide. He looked scared now. "Please, sir," he said, "I really cannot play. I will just make noise. I don't want to bother anyone." But Marcus was not going to let the boy escape now. He was having too much fun with his cruel joke. "Nonsense," he said. "I insist. As tonight's featured performer, I am personally inviting you to play. How can you refuse such an honor?" Some of the guests started clapping louder. "Play, play, play, play," they said. They thought they were being encouraging, but they were really just making the boy feel worse. Danny looked around desperately. He was looking for his mother, but he could not see her. She was probably still working in the kitchen and had no idea what was happening to her son. Marcus took Danny's arm and started walking toward the stage. "Come along, maestro," he said. "Your audience is waiting." The crowd of people followed them toward the piano. They were all talking excitedly about what they were going to see. Some of them were making bets about how bad the boy would sound when he tried to play. Danny's legs felt shaky as he walked. He had never been so scared in his life. All these rich, important people were going to watch him fail. They were going to laugh at him when he could not play their fancy piano. He would embarrass himself and his mother. When they reached the stage, Marcus helped Danny climb up the steps. The piano looked huge and scary up close. It was black and shiny and perfect. Danny had never seen such a beautiful instrument before. "There you are," Marcus said, pointing to the piano bench. "Your throne awaits, young maestro." The guests laughed at Marcus's joke. They thought he was very clever and entertaining. They gathered around the stage to get a better view of what was about to happen. Danny sat down on the piano bench very slowly. His feet did not even touch the floor properly. The bench was too high for him. This made some of the guests laugh. Even more, Marcus stood next to the piano with his arms crossed. He was very pleased with himself. This poor boy was about to be completely humiliated in front of all these important people. It would teach him and his mother to stay in their proper place. "Now then," Marcus said to Danny, "what would you like? To play for us? Perhaps something classical? Or maybe a simple children's song would be more appropriate." The guests laughed again. They thought Marcus was being very funny. They could not wait to hear what horrible sounds the boy would make. When he touched the keys, Danny looked down at the piano keys. They were white and black and looked very complicated. He had seen pianos before, but never this close. Never when he was supposed to actually play one. His hands were shaking as he lifted them toward the keys. He could hear the guests talking and laughing. Someone said, "This should be interesting." Another person said, "The poor child looks terrified." But not everyone was being mean. In the back of the crowd, an old woman with kind eyes looked worried. She did not think this was funny at all. She thought Marcus was being cruel to the boy. Danny's mother, Maria Martinez, finally came out of the kitchen. She was carrying a tray of empty glasses and was looking for Danny. When she saw what was happening, she almost dropped the tray. Her son was sitting at the piano on the stage with all the rich guests staring at him. The famous piano player was standing next to him with a mean smile on his face. Maria understood immediately what was happening. The important man was making fun of her boy. Maria wanted to run to the stage and take Danny away. But she could not. If she made a scene, she would lose her job. She needed this job to pay rent and buy food for Danny. She had to stand there and watch her son be humiliated. Danny saw his mother in the crowd. Their eyes met for a moment. He could see that she was scared and sad for him, but he also saw something else in her eyes. She was telling him to be brave and strong. Danny took a deep breath. He looked at Marcus, who was still smiling his cruel smile. Then he looked at all the rich people who were waiting to laugh at him. Finally, he looked back down at the piano keys. Something strange happened then. As Danny stared at the keys, he stopped feeling scared. The keys did not look scary anymore. They looked like old friends, like something he had been waiting his whole life to touch. Danny's hands stopped shaking. He placed them gently on the keys and closed his eyes for a moment. Danny sat quietly at the piano for several seconds. His small hands rested on the white and black keys. The rich people in the audience started to get impatient. Some of them whispered to each other, asking when the boy was going to start playing. Marcus tapped his foot and looked at his expensive watch. "Any time now, young maestro," he said with his fake smile. "We are all waiting to hear your beautiful music." A few people in the crowd laughed softly. They thought Marcus was being very funny. They expected Danny to hit a few random keys and make terrible sounds. Then Marcus would have had his joke, and they could all go back to their wine and fancy food. But Danny was not thinking about the people watching him. He was remembering something from a long time ago. When he was very little, maybe 6 years old, his grandmother used to take care of him while his mother worked. His grandmother loved classical music and played it on an old radio all day long. He remembered sitting on the floor next to the radio, listening to the beautiful sounds. His grandmother would tell him the names of the songs and the people who wrote them. She would say things like, "This is Chopin, Danny. He was a great composer who wrote music that sounds like magic." After his grandmother died, Danny missed the music. His mother could not afford to buy CDs or pay for music on the computer. But sometimes Danny would find classical music playing in stores or on the radio in other people's cars. Every time he heard it, he felt like his grandmother was with him again. Danny had taught himself to play those songs in his head. He would imagine his fingers moving on piano keys, playing the melodies he remembered. He had never touched a real piano before, but he had played thousands of songs in his mind now. Sitting at this beautiful piano, Danny felt like all those imaginary songs wanted to come out of his fingers. He could almost hear his grandmother's voice saying, "Play, Danny, let the music out." Danny pressed down on one key very gently. The sound was clear and sweet. It was better than any sound he had ever heard. He pressed another key, then another. Each note was perfect and beautiful. The talking in the audience got quieter. People were starting to pay attention to the sounds Danny was making. They were not the random noises everyone expected. These were real musical notes. Marcus stopped. Smiling, he moved closer to the piano to see what the boy was doing. This was not part of his plan. The boy was supposed to fail and be embarrassed. He was not supposed to actually make music. Danny began to play a song he remembered from his grandmother's radio. It was Chopin's Minute Waltz, one of the most beautiful and difficult pieces ever written. His small fingers moved across the keys. Like they had been doing this for years, the melody started soft and gentle, like water flowing in a quiet stream. Danny's hands seemed to know exactly where to go. His left hand played the deep, steady rhythm while his right hand danced through the beautiful melody. The people in the audience stopped talking completely. They could not believe what they were hearing. This poor boy in his old clothes was playing classical music like a professional. The sound was not just correct, it was magical. As Danny played, his face changed. He did not look scared anymore. He looked peaceful and happy. It was like he had found something he had been looking for his whole life. The music was coming from somewhere deep inside him, flowing through his fingers and into the piano. Marcus stood frozen next to the piano. His mouth was open and his face was pale. He had studied piano for almost 40 years. He knew how hard it was to play Chopin. Most students needed years of lessons just to attempt this piece. But this 12-year-old boy was playing it perfectly. The melody got faster and more complex. Danny's fingers flew across the keys, hitting every note exactly right. The music filled the huge ballroom and touched everyone who heard it. Some people in the audience had tears in their eyes. An old man in an expensive suit whispered to his wife, "I have never heard anything so beautiful." A woman with diamonds around her neck put her hand over her heart and said, "This child is a miracle." Danny's mother, Maria, watched from the back of the room with tears running down her face. She had always known her son loved music, but she had no idea he could do this. She felt proud and amazed and scared all at the same time. The song reached its most difficult part, where the melodies seemed to dance and spin like leaves in the wind. Danny's hands moved so fast they looked like butterflies flying over the keys, but every note was clear and perfect. He never made a mistake. Marcus felt sick to his stomach. He had tried to humiliate this boy, but instead the boy was showing everyone that he had more talent than Marcus had ever seen. Marcus thought about all the years he had spent studying and practicing, all the money his parents had spent on his education. This poor child with no training at all was playing better than most professional pianists. The people in the audience were completely silent now. They did not want to miss a single note. They had come to this charity event expecting to eat good food and feel important. Instead, they were witnessing something that would change their lives forever. As the song neared its end, Danny played with even more feeling and power. The music seemed to fill not just the room, but the hearts of everyone listening. It was like Danny was telling them all a story without words, a story about love and loss and hope and dreams. The final notes rang out clear and strong. Danny held them for just the right amount of time, then lifted his hands from the keys. The piano fell silent, but the memory of the music seemed to hang in the air like perfume for a long moment. Nobody moved or spoke. The wealthy guests just stared at Danny in complete shock. They could not believe what they had just heard. This poor boy had just given them the most beautiful musical performance of their lives. Danny looked up from the piano keys for the first time since he had started playing. He saw all the faces staring at him, but now they looked different. They did not look mean or amused anymore. They looked amazed and grateful and maybe a little ashamed. Then someone started clapping. It was the old woman in the back who had looked worried about Danny earlier. Her applause was slow and respectful, like the clapping people do in church. Soon other people joined in. The clapping got louder and faster. People started standing up from their seats. They were giving Danny a standing ovation, the highest honor they could give to a performer. "Bravo!" Someone shouted. "Magnificent!" called out another person. "Incredible!" said a third voice. Danny had never heard applause before. He did not know what to do. He just sat on the piano bench looking at all the people clapping for him. His face was red again, but this time it was not from embarrassment. It was from happiness and surprise. Marcus stood next to the piano like a statue. His cruel joke had turned into something he never expected. This boy had just shown everyone in the room what real talent looked like. And Marcus knew that he could never take credit for discovering this talent. Everyone had seen how mean he had been to Danny. The applause went on for several minutes. People were clapping so hard their hands hurt. Some were wiping tears from their eyes. Others were shaking their heads in amazement. They had never expected to hear such beautiful music at a charity dinner. Danny finally stood up from the piano bench. He was not sure what he was supposed to do. He had never performed for people before. He just stood there looking at all the faces staring back at him. Marcus was the first person to stop clapping. His face was very serious now. All the meanness was gone from his expression. He looked confused and upset, like someone had just told him something that changed everything he believed. "How?" Marcus asked Danny. His voice was quiet, but in the silent room everyone could hear him. "How did you learn to play like that?" Danny looked up at the famous piano player. He was not scared of Marcus anymore. The music had made him feel brave and strong. "I taught myself," Danny said simply. Marcus shook his head. "That is impossible. Nobody can teach themselves to play Chopin. That piece takes years of study with the best teachers. Where did you study?" "Who was your teacher?" "I never had a teacher," Danny said. "I learned by listening." A woman in the audience spoke up. "Listening to what?" she asked. Her voice was kind and curious, not mean like Marcus had been. Danny turned to look at her. "My grandmother had an old radio. She played classical music all day. I used to sit and listen with her. She told me the names of the songs and the people who wrote them." "But listening is not the same as playing," Marcus said. He was getting frustrated. What Danny was saying did not make sense. "How did you know where to put your fingers? How did you know which keys to press?" Danny thought for a moment before answering. "I used to imagine playing the songs in my head. I would pretend my fingers were moving on piano keys. I did this every day for years." An old man in the audience leaned forward in his chair. "But you must have practiced on a real piano somewhere. You cannot play like that without practice." Danny's face got a little red. He looked down at his feet. "Sometimes I sneak into the community center after it closes. There's an old piano in the back room. The janitor lets me play it for a little while before he locks up." Maria, Danny's mother, was still standing in the back of the room. She was crying now, but they were happy tears. She had not known about Danny going to the community center. She worked so many hours that she was often not home when Danny got back from school. A woman with gray hair and expensive jewelry stood up. "How often do you practice at this community center?" she asked. "Maybe once or twice a week?" Danny said. But only for 30 minutes or so. The janitor has to go home to his family. The people in the audience looked at each other with amazement. This boy had learned to play one of the most difficult pieces of classical music with almost no practice time and no teacher. It seemed impossible, but they had all heard him play with their own ears. Marcus felt like the ground was moving under his feet. He had spent his whole life believing that great music came from great privilege. He thought you needed expensive teachers and perfect pianos and years of study. But this poor boy had just proved him wrong. What other pieces do you know? Marcus asked. His voice sounded strange, like he was afraid to hear the answer. Danny smiled for the first time since this whole thing started. I know lots of songs. Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, Brahms. My grandmother taught me their names. I have been playing them in my head for years. A young woman in the audience called out, "Can you play something else for us?" Danny looked at Marcus, asking permission with his eyes. Marcus nodded slowly. He was too shocked to speak. Danny sat back down at the piano. This time he was not scared. He felt comfortable now, like he belonged at this beautiful instrument. He thought for a moment about what to play next. He decided on a piece by Mozart, a sonata his grandmother had loved very much. As his fingers began to move across the keys, the room filled with music again. This piece was different from the Chopin. It was lighter and happier, like sunshine after rain. The people listened in complete silence. They were still trying to understand what they were seeing. This child was not just lucky or gifted. He was something very special, something that only came along once in many years. When Danny finished the Mozart piece, the applause was even louder than before. People were standing up again, but this time they were also talking excitedly to each other. "He is a genius," said one man. "I have never heard anything like it," said a woman. "Someone needs to help this boy," called out another voice Marcus heard. These comments and felt terrible. He had tried to embarrass Danny and make him feel small. But the boy had shown everyone that he had more natural talent than most trained musicians would ever have. An elderly woman walked up to the stage. She was wearing a beautiful dress and had kind eyes. "Danny," she said, "what do you want to be when you grow up?" Danny did not have to think about his answer. "I want to be a piano player like Mr. Whitmore," he said, looking at Marcus. "I want to play music for people and make them happy." Marcus felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. This boy still looked up to him, even after Marcus had been so cruel. Danny did not seem to understand that Marcus had been trying to hurt him. He thought Marcus was just being friendly. The elderly woman smiled at Danny. "I think you are going to be a wonderful piano player," she said. "Much better than any of us ever imagined." She turned to look at Marcus. Her smile disappeared. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "I hope you are proud of yourself tonight." Marcus knew she was not really congratulating him. She was pointing out how badly he had behaved. He looked around at all the faces in the audience. Some people looked happy about Danny's performance, but others looked angry at Marcus for the way he had treated the boy. A man in a gray suit stood up. "This young man needs proper training," he said loudly. "He needs a real teacher and a good piano to practice on. We cannot let this talent go to waste." Several other people nodded and said they agreed. They started talking about what could be done to help Danny. Someone mentioned scholarships. Another person talked about finding him a good teacher. Danny listened to all this talk with wide eyes. He did not really understand what they were saying, but it sounded like these people wanted to help him learn more about music. That made him very happy. Marcus listened too, but he felt worse and worse with every word. These people were right. Danny needed help and training. He needed someone to guide his amazing talent. But Marcus knew he had lost the right to be that person. He had shown everyone what kind of man he really was. Maria finally walked toward the stage. She had been standing in the back, not sure if she should come forward. But she was Danny's mother, and she needed to be with him. When Danny saw his mother, his face lit up with joy. "Mama," he called out. "Did you hear me play?" Maria climbed up onto the stage and hugged her son tightly. "I heard you, Mio," she whispered in his ear. "You were magnificent." The people in the audience watched this tender moment between mother and son. Many of them had children of their own, and they could imagine how proud and amazed Maria must feel. Marcus could not sleep that night. He lay in his expensive bed in his luxury apartment, staring at the ceiling. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Danny's face. He heard the beautiful music the boy had played. But most of all, he remembered the cruel way he had treated the child. The charity event had ended hours ago, but Marcus could not stop thinking about what had happened. After Danny's performance, many wealthy people had surrounded the boy and his mother. They talked about helping Danny get proper music lessons. They exchanged phone numbers and made promises to call Maria the next day. Marcus had watched all of this from far away. He did not join the group of people trying to help Danny. He felt too ashamed of what he had done. Several people had given him angry looks as they left the event. They knew he had tried to embarrass the boy for his own entertainment. Now Marcus was alone in his dark apartment, facing the truth about himself. He had always thought he was better than other people because he was rich and famous. He believed that poor people like Danny and Maria were not as important as wealthy people like himself, but tonight, a 12-year-old boy had shown him how wrong he was. Danny had more natural musical talent in his little finger than Marcus had developed in 40 years of expensive training. The boy had learned to play masterpieces by listening to an old radio and practicing in his imagination. Marcus got out of bed and walked to his own piano. It was a beautiful grand piano that cost more money than most people made in several years. He had owned it for 10 years, but tonight it looked different to him. It looked cold and lifeless compared to the magic Danny had created on the piano at the charity event. Marcus sat down and tried to play the same chop and piece Danny had performed. His fingers moved across the keys correctly. Every note was technically perfect, but something was missing. The music sounded empty and mechanical. It did not have the heart and soul that Danny had put into his playing. For the first time in his life, Marcus understood the difference between playing notes and making music. He had spent decades learning to play notes perfectly. But Danny, with no training at all, knew how to make music that touched people's hearts. Marcus stopped playing and put his head in his hands. He felt sick with shame and guilt. He had tried to humiliate a child who had more talent than Marcus would ever have. He had wanted to embarrass Danny in front of all those wealthy people just to make himself feel superior. But the worst part was what Marcus now understood about himself. He had always looked down on poor people. He thought they were lazy or stupid or somehow deserving of their difficult lives. He believed that rich people like himself were better and smarter and more valuable. Danny had destroyed all of these beliefs in less than 5 minutes. The boy had shown everyone that talent and worth had nothing to do with money or social class. Danny was poor, but he had a gift that was priceless. His mother worked in kitchens to support them, but she had raised a son who could create magic. With his hands, Marcus walked to his window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Danny was probably sleeping in a small apartment. His mother had probably worked until late cleaning up after the charity event. They would wake up tomorrow still struggling to pay rent and buy food, despite Danny's incredible gift. Meanwhile, Marcus lived in luxury. He had more money than he could spend in a lifetime. He owned expensive cars and clothes and jewelry, but what had he done to deserve all of this? He had been born into a wealthy family. His parents had paid for the best teachers and schools. Everything had been given to him. Danny, on the other hand, had been born into poverty. His mother worked multiple jobs just to survive. The boy had no advantages, no expensive teachers, no perfect piano to practice on. But he had taught himself to play music that made people cry with joy. Marcus realized that if Danny had been born into his wealthy family, the boy would already be famous around the world. But because Danny was poor, his talent had almost been wasted. If Marcus had not decided to embarrass him tonight, Danny might have gone his whole life without anyone knowing what he could do. This thought made Marcus feel even worse. How many other talented children were out there hidden in poor families? How many gifts were being wasted because children did not have the advantages that wealth could provide? Marcus had always supported charities that helped sick children or fed hungry people. He thought this made him a good person, but he realized now that he had never really cared about poor people as individuals. He gave money to make himself feel better, not because he truly wanted to help. Tonight had changed everything. Danny was not just a poor child who needed charity. He was a real person with hopes and dreams and incredible abilities. Marcus had seen the love in the boy's eyes when he looked at the piano. He had heard the passion in Danny's music. This was not someone to pity or look down on. This was someone to admire and respect. Marcus spent the rest of the night thinking about Danny's life. The boy probably went to a poor school with old books and not enough teachers. He probably worried about money and whether his mother was working too hard. But despite all of these problems, Danny had found a way to develop his gift for music. By morning, Marcus had made a decision. He could not undo the cruel thing he had done to Danny. He could not take back the embarrassment he had tried to cause. But he could try to make things right. Marcus had connections in the music world that could help Danny. He knew the best teachers and the finest music schools. He had enough money to pay for Danny's education without even noticing the cost. Most importantly, he understood now that helping Danny was not charity. It was an investment in something beautiful and rare, but Marcus also knew it would not be easy. Danny's mother had probably heard about his reputation for being arrogant and mean. She had seen how he treated her son at the charity event. She would have no reason to trust him or accept his help. Marcus would have to prove that he had changed. He would have to show Maria and Danny that he truly wanted to help, not because it would make him look good, but because it was the right thing to do. As the sun rose over the city, Marcus was still sitting by his window, planning how he would approach Danny's family. He knew he had a lot of work to do to earn their trust. But for the first time in his life, Marcus was willing to admit he had been wrong about something important. He thought about calling his assistant to get Maria's contact information. But then he realized that would be too impersonal. If he was really going to change, he needed to do this the right way. He needed to show respect for Danny and his mother by approaching them properly. Marcus decided he would go to the community center where Danny practiced. He would wait there until the boy showed up, and then he would apologize face to face. It was the least he could do after what had happened. 3 days after the charity event, Marcus found himself standing outside the Riverside Community Center. It was a small, old building in a part of the city he had never visited before. The paint was peeling from the walls, and some of the windows had cracks in them. It looked nothing like the fancy concert halls where Marcus usually performed. Marcus had been coming to the community center every afternoon, hoping to find Danny, but so far the boy had not shown up. Marcus was starting to worry that Danny might have been too embarrassed by what happened at the charity event to come back to his secret practice place on this third day. Marcus sat on a bench across the street from the community center. He was wearing simple clothes instead of his usual expensive suits. He did not want to draw attention to himself or scare Danny away if the boy did appear. As Marcus waited, he watched the neighborhood around him. He saw children playing in the street because they had no safe parks to play in. He saw mothers carrying heavy bags of groceries while trying to keep track of several young children. He saw old men sitting on steps because they had nowhere else to go. This was Danny's world. This was where the boy lived every day. Marcus tried to imagine what it would be like to grow up here, with so little money and so few opportunities. He thought about his own childhood in a big house with a music room and a full-time piano teacher. The difference was shocking. Around 5 o'clock, Marcus saw a familiar figure walking down the street. It was Danny, carrying a school backpack that looked almost as old as his shoes. The boy walked quickly, looking around to make sure no one was watching him. Danny went to the back door of the community center and knocked softly. After a moment, an older man opened the door. Marcus could see them talking quietly. Then the man smiled and let Danny inside. Marcus waited for a few minutes, then crossed the street and went to the same back door. He knocked gently, the way Danny had done. The same older man opened the door. He was probably in his 60s with gray hair and kind eyes. He wore work clothes and had paint stains on his hands. "Can I help you?" the man asked. He looked confused. "To see a well-dressed stranger at the back door of the community center. My name is Marcus Whitmore," Marcus said. "I'm looking for a boy named Danny Martinez. I believe he practices piano here sometimes." The man's face changed when he heard Marcus's name. "You are the famous piano player," he said. "I saw you on the news after that charity thing. You are the one who was mean to Danny." Marcus felt his face get red with shame. "Yes," he said quietly, "I am. And I came here to apologize to him. I also want to talk to him about something important." The man, whose name was Carlos, looked at Marcus for a long time. He was trying to decide if Marcus could be trusted. "Danny is a good boy," Carlos said finally. "He never causes trouble, he just wants to play music. Why should I let you see him?" "Because I made a terrible mistake," Marcus said. "I was cruel to Danny and I want to make it right. I want to help him if he will let me." Carlos thought about this. He had seen the news reports about what happened at the charity event. He knew that Danny had played beautifully and that many rich people were now interested in helping him. But Carlos also knew that Danny had been hurt by Marcus's behavior. "Danny is practicing now," Carlos said. "If you want to talk to him, you can come in. But if you upset him again, I will throw you out myself." Marcus nodded. "I understand," he said. "Thank you for giving me this chance." Carlos led Marcus through the community center. They walked past a room where children were doing homework with volunteer tutors. They passed a kitchen where volunteers were preparing dinner for families who could not afford to buy enough food. Marcus saw how many people were trying to help each other in this poor neighborhood. Finally, they reached a small room in the back of the building. Through the open door, Marcus could hear piano music. It was Danny playing a piece by Beethoven. Even on the old, out-of-tune piano, the music was beautiful. Carlos knocked softly on the doorframe. "Danny," he said, "you have a visitor?" Danny stopped playing and turned around. When he saw Marcus, his eyes got wide with surprise. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Hello, Danny," Marcus said softly. "May I come in?" Danny looked at Carlos, who nodded encouragingly. "I guess so," Danny said. Marcus walked into the small room. The piano was indeed old, and some of the keys stuck when you pressed them. The bench was wobbly and the wrong height. But Marcus could see that Danny had been practicing seriously despite these problems. "Danny," Marcus began, "I came here to say I'm sorry. What I did to you at the charity event was wrong. I was trying to embarrass you, and that was cruel and unfair." Danny looked down at the piano keys. "Why did you want to embarrass me?" he asked quietly. Marcus sat down on a folding chair next to the piano. This was the hardest question Danny could have asked. "Because I thought I was better than you," Marcus said honestly. "I thought that because you were poor and I was rich that made me more important. I was wrong about that." Danny looked up at Marcus with confusion in his eyes. "But you are a famous piano player. You are better than me." "No, Danny," Marcus said firmly. "I am not better than you. I have had many advantages in my life that you have not had. But you have something that I do not have. You have a natural gift for music that is very rare and very special." Danny did not seem to understand what Marcus meant. "But I do not know how to play properly," Danny said. "I just make it up as I go." Marcus smiled. "That is exactly what makes you so special. You do not just play notes like I do, you make real music. You play with feeling and heart. That is something that cannot be taught." Carlos was listening from the doorway. He could see that Marcus was being sincere with Danny. The famous piano player was not trying to impress anyone or make himself look good. He was just talking honestly to a child. "Danny," Marcus continued, "I would like to help you learn more about music. I know some very good teachers who could work with you. I also know about schools where you could study with other young musicians." Danny's eyes lit up with excitement. "Really? You would do that for me?" "If you and your mother agree to it, yes," Marcus said. "But first, I need to meet with your mother and explain what happened at the charity event." "I need to apologize too." Her too, and I need to earn her trust. Danny thought about this for a moment. My mother works very hard, he said. She cleans offices at night and serves food during the day. She does not have much time to talk to people. When would be a good time for me to see her? Marcus asked. She gets home from her night job around 7 in the morning, Danny said. She sleeps for a few hours, then goes to her day job. Maybe you could come to our apartment around noon when she gets up. Marcus nodded. Would you be willing to give me your address? And would you ask your mother if she would be willing to talk to me? Danny looked uncertain. I do not know if she will want to see you. She was very upset about what happened at the charity event. She cried when we got home that night. This news hit Marcus like a punch in the stomach. He had not just hurt Danny with his cruel behavior. He had also hurt Danny's mother, who had worked so hard to provide for her son. I understand why she would not want to see me, Marcus said, but please ask her anyway. Tell her that I want to apologize and that I want to help you with your music education. Tell her that I will not take up much of her time. Danny agreed to talk to his mother. He wrote down his address on a piece of paper and gave it to Marcus. The address was in a part of the city that Marcus had never visited. Thank you, Danny, Marcus said as he stood up to leave. And thank you for giving me a chance to make things right. As Marcus walked back through the community center, he saw Carlos watching him carefully. You really mean it, do not you? Carlos asked. You really want to help the boy? Yes, Marcus said, I do. Danny has a gift that should not be wasted. And I have the ability to help him develop that gift. It is the least I can do after the way I treated him. Carlos nodded slowly. Danny is like a grandson to me, he said. If you hurt him again, you will answer to me. Marcus understood that Carlos was not making an empty threat. The older man truly cared about Danny and would protect him if necessary. I will not hurt him again, Marcus promised. I want to help him succeed. The next day at noon, Marcus stood outside a small apartment building in one of the poorest parts of the city. The building was old and needed repairs, but it was clean and someone had planted flowers in small pots by the front door. Marcus climbed 3 flights of narrow stairs to find apartment 3B. He knocked softly on the door and heard footsteps inside. After a moment, the door opened and Maria Martinez looked out at him. She was a small woman with tired eyes, but her face was strong and determined. She wore simple clothes and her hair was pulled back from her face. You are Marcus Whitmore, she said. It was not a question. Yes, ma'am, Marcus replied. Danny said he would ask if you might be willing to talk to me for a few minutes. Maria looked at him for a long time without speaking. Marcus could see the suspicion and anger in her eyes. She had every right to hate him for what he had done to her. Son, come in, she said finally, but not for long. I have to go to work soon. Marcus followed her into the small apartment. It was tiny but very clean and neat. The furniture was old but well cared for. On one wall hung a picture of an elderly woman that Marcus guessed must be Danny's grandmother. On a small table sat an old radio, probably the same one Danny had learned music from. Sit down, Maria said, pointing to a chair at the kitchen table. She sat across from him and folded her hands. Say what you came to say? Marcus had practiced this conversation in his mind many times, but now that he was here, the words were hard to find. Mrs. Martinez, I came to apologize for what I did to Danny at the charity event. I was cruel and unfair to him. There is no excuse for my behavior. Maria's face did not change. Why? She asked simply. Why did you try to hurt my son? This was the question Marcus had been dreading. How could he explain his prejudice and arrogance to this woman who worked so hard to take care of her child? Because I thought I was better than him, Marcus said quietly. Because he was poor and I was rich. Because I believed that poor people like you and Danny were not as important as wealthy people like me. I was wrong about all of that. Maria's eyes flashed with anger. You thought you were better than my son? You do not know anything about my son. You do not know how good and kind and smart he is. You do not know how hard he works in school or how much he helps me with everything. You are right, Marcus said. I did not know Danny at all. I only saw his old clothes and assumed things about him that were not true. I judged him before I knew anything about who he really was. And now you know who he is? Maria asked. Because he can play piano? Marcus thought carefully before answering. No, he said. Danny's musical talent is amazing, but that is not what makes him special. What makes him special is that he has stayed kind and hopeful despite having so many difficulties in his life. He could have been angry at me for trying to embarrass him, but instead he still says he wants to be a piano player like me. Maria's expression softened slightly. This was not what she had expected Marcus to say. Mrs. Martinez, Marcus continued, I would like to help Danny develop his musical abilities. I know the best teachers and the finest schools. I can arrange for him to have proper lessons and a good piano to practice on. Why? Maria asked suspiciously. What do you get out of it? Nothing, Marcus said. Except maybe the chance to do? Something good instead of something cruel. I have been given many advantages in my life that I did not earn. Maybe I can use those advantages to help someone who deserves them more than I ever did. Maria studied his face for a long moment. How? Do I know you will not hurt him again? How do I know this is not just another way to make fun of poor people? Marcus understood her fear. She was a mother protecting her child, and she had already seen how cruel Marcus could be. You do not know, Marcus said honestly. You will have to decide whether or not to trust me. All I can tell you is that what happened at the charity event changed me. Danny showed me things about myself that I did not want to see. I cannot undo what I did, but I can try to make it right. Maria was quiet for several minutes. Marcus could hear the sounds of the city through the thin walls. Children playing, people talking, cars driving by. This was the world Danny lived in every day. What exactly are you offering? Maria asked finally. Piano lessons with one of the best teachers in the city, Marcus said. Access to a good piano for daily practice. Eventually, if Danny wants it. And qualifies a scholarship to a music conservatory where he can study with other gifted young musicians. And what would this cost us? Maria asked. Nothing, Marcus said. I will pay for everything, Maria shook her head. I do not take charity. I work for what my son and I need. Marcus had expected this response. He could see that Maria was proud and independent. She did not want to be seen as someone who needed help from rich people. This would not be charity, Marcus said. Danny has a rare gift. Investing in his education would be like investing in a great work of art. The world needs to hear his music. I would just be making sure that happens. Maria considered this. She could see that Marcus was trying to treat Danny's talent with respect, not pity. I will think about it, she said finally. But I need to talk to Danny first. This has to be his choice too, Marcus nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. As Marcus was getting ready to leave, Maria asked one more question. If you do this for Danny, what do you expect from him? Just that he continues to love music the way he does now, Marcus said. I do not want to change who he is. I just want to give him the tools he needs to become the best musician he can. Over the next few weeks, Marcus kept his promise to give Maria and Danny time to think. But he also began preparing for the possibility that they would say yes. He contacted his friend, Dr. Sarah Chun, who was one of the finest piano teachers in the country. He explained Danny's situation and asked if she would be willing to work with the boy. Dr. Chun was initially skeptical. She had heard about the charity event and thought Marcus might be trying to make himself look good after his bad behavior. But when Marcus played a recording of Danny's performance, her attitude changed completely. This child is extraordinary, Dr. Chun said after listening to the recording. I have never heard natural talent like this. Of course I will teach him. Marcus also arranged for Danny to have access to a practice room with a good piano at a music school downtown. He made sure it would be available to Danny every day after school and on weekends. Finally, Marcus researched scholarship programs at the best music conservatories in the country. He wanted to be ready with options when Danny was old enough to apply. After 2 weeks, Maria called Marcus and asked him to come back to their apartment. This time, Danny was there too. We have decided to accept your offer, Maria said. But We have some conditions, Marcus nodded eagerly. What conditions? First, Maria said, if Danny ever feels uncomfortable or unhappy with the lessons, we stop immediately. Second, Danny continues to go to his regular school and spends time with his friends here in the neighborhood. I do not want him to forget where he comes from. Third, Danny added, I still want to practice at the community center sometimes. Carlos is my friend, and I like helping the other kids there learn about music, Marcus smiled. These were exactly the kinds of conditions he had hoped for. They showed that Danny and his mother understood the importance of staying true to themselves, even as Danny's life changed. I agree to all of those conditions, Marcus said. When would you like to start? And so began the most important partnership of Marcus's life. 3 times a week, he picked up Danny and drove him to Dr. Chin's studio for lessons. He watched as the brilliant teacher helped Danny understand the technical aspects of piano, playing while encouraging him to keep the natural feeling that made his music so special. Marcus also spent time with Danny outside of the lessons. He took the boy to concerts and introduced him to other musicians. He taught Danny about the history of classical music and the stories behind the great composers, but Marcus learned as much from Danny as Danny learned from him. The boy taught Marcus about perseverance and gratitude. Danny never complained about the long hours of practice or the difficulty of learning new techniques. He was just happy to have the chance to study music seriously. Danny also taught Marcus about staying humble. Despite his growing skill and the attention he was receiving from the music world, Danny remained the same kind, thoughtful boy he had always been. He still helped his mother with chores and spent time with his friends in the neighborhood. Most importantly, Danny taught Marcus about the true purpose of music. For Marcus, music had become about fame and money and impressing people. But Danny played music to bring joy to others and to honor the memory of his grandmother who had first introduced him to its beauty. As the months passed, Marcus found himself changing in ways he had never expected. He began using his fame and wealth to help other young musicians from poor families. He started a foundation that provided instruments and lessons to children who could not afford them. Marcus also changed the way he performed. Instead of just playing technically perfect pieces to impress wealthy audiences, he began choosing music that told stories and touched people's hearts. His concerts became more popular than ever, but for different reasons than before. 2 years after that life-changing night at the charity event, Danny Martinez walked onto the stage at Lincoln Center in New York City. He was now 14 years old and had grown taller, but his kind eyes and gentle smile remained the same. Tonight, he would perform as a featured soloist with the New York Philharmonic Orchestra, one of the most prestigious orchestras in the world. The concert hall was packed with over 2,000 people. The audience included famous musicians, wealthy patrons of the arts, and music critics from major newspapers. But scattered throughout the crowd were also people from Danny's neighborhood, his teachers from school, families from the community center, and children he had helped learn to play piano. Maria Martinez sat in the front row, wearing a beautiful new dress that Danny had bought for her with money from his first paid performance. Next to her sat Carlos from the community center, wearing his best suit and beaming with pride. In the same row were Dr. Sarah Chun, Danny's piano teacher, and several other people who had become important in Danny's life over the past 2 years. Marcus Whitmore was also in the front row, but he was not sitting with the other VIP guests. He had chosen to sit with Maria and Danny's other supporters. Over the past 2 years, Marcus had learned to value different things than fame and social status. Tonight, he was simply a proud friend watching Danny achieve his dreams. As Danny approached the beautiful grand piano on the stage, the audience grew quiet. Many people in the crowd remembered the news stories about the poor boy who had amazed everyone at a charity event. Others had heard recordings of Danny's playing or seen videos of his performances online. But tonight would be the first time. Most of them heard him play in person. Danny sat down at the piano bench and adjusted it to the right height. He looked out at the audience and found his mother's face in the crowd. She smiled at him and nodded encouragingly. Then Danny looked at Marcus, who gave him a thumbs-up sign. The conductor raised his baton. and the orchestra began to play the opening notes of Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 21. This was one of the most beautiful and challenging pieces ever written. For piano and orchestra, Danny had been practicing it for 6 months, working with Dr. Chun to perfect every note and phrase. When it was time for Danny to begin playing, he placed his hands on the keys with the same confidence he had shown 2 years ago. But now his technique was much more advanced, thanks to countless hours of lessons and practice. Still, the most important thing about his playing had not changed. Danny still played with his heart and soul, not just his fingers. The music that filled the concert hall was breathtaking. Danny's piano seemed to dance with the orchestra, sometimes leading the melody and sometimes following it. The sound was rich and full of emotion, telling a story without words. Some people in the audience had tears in their eyes as they listened. Marcus watched Danny play and remembered that first night at the charity event. He thought about how cruel he had been and how differently things might have turned out. If Danny had been too embarrassed to play that night, the world might never have discovered his incredible talent. But Marcus also thought about how much both he and Danny had grown over the past 2 years. Danny had developed his natural gifts into true artistry through hard work and excellent teaching. But he had remained humble and kind, never forgetting where he came from or the people who had helped him along the way. Marcus had changed even more dramatically. The arrogant, prejudiced man who had tried to embarrass a poor child was gone. In his place was someone who understood that true worth had nothing to do with money or social status. Marcus had learned to use his privilege and connections to help others, instead of just helping himself. As Danny played the final movement of the concerto, the music built to a magnificent climax. His fingers flew across the keys with precision and grace, but every note was filled with feeling. The orchestra supported him perfectly, creating a wall of sound that seemed to lift the piano's melody toward the ceiling. When the last note faded away, the concert hall was silent for a moment. Then the audience exploded into applause. People jumped to their feet, clapping and cheering. Some were crying with joy. Others were shaking their heads in amazement at what they had just heard. The applause went on for 10 minutes. Danny stood next to the piano, overwhelmed by the response. He had never imagined that so many people could be moved by his music. The conductor shook his hand, and the orchestra musicians tapped their bows on their music stands in appreciation. But the most meaningful moment came when Danny looked into the audience and saw the faces of the people who had believed in him from the beginning. His mother was crying with happiness. Carlos was clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. Dr. Chun was nodding with satisfaction at how beautifully her student had performed, and Marcus was clapping too, but with a look of deep gratitude on his face. Not gratitude for Danny's performance, but gratitude for the lesson Danny had taught him about what really mattered in life. After the concert, there was a reception for Danny and the other performers. Many important people came up to congratulate him and talk about his future in music. Record companies wanted to make albums with him. Concert halls around the world wanted to book him for performances. But Danny was most excited to talk to the children from his neighborhood who had come to hear him play. He knelt down to their level and answered their questions about the piano and about music. He told them that if they worked hard and never gave up on their dreams, they could achieve amazing things too. A reporter from a major newspaper asked Danny what he planned to do with his success. Danny thought for a moment before answering. "I want to keep playing music for people," he said. "But I also want to help other kids like me who love music but do not have the chances I have had. Music should be for everyone, not just rich people." Marcus heard this answer and felt proud of the young man Danny had become. The boy had not been spoiled by success or forgotten his roots. He wanted to use his gifts to help others, just like Marcus had learned to do. Later that evening, after most of the guests had gone home, Danny, Maria, and Marcus sat together in a quiet corner of the reception hall. They reflected on the amazing journey that had brought them to this moment. "Do you ever think about that night at the charity event?" Maria asked Marcus. Marcus nodded. "Every day," he said. "It was the worst thing I ever did, but it led to the best thing I ever did. If I had not been so cruel to Danny that night, I might never have learned what kind of person I really was, and I might never have had the chance to change." Danny looked at Marcus with understanding in his young eyes. "I'm glad it happened the way it did," he said, "because now we are friends, and I have learned so much from you." "You have taught me much more than I have taught you," Marcus replied. "You taught me that talent and worth have nothing to do with money. You taught me that being humble and kind is more important than being famous. Most of all, you taught me that everyone deserves a chance to show what they can do." As they talked, news reporters and photographers captured their conversation. The story of Danny's triumph and Marcus's transformation would be told in newspapers and magazines around the world. But for the three people sitting together that night, the real story was not about fame or success. The real story was about how one act of cruelty had been turned into something beautiful through forgiveness, hard work, and the power of believing in each other. Danny had forgiven Marcus for his meanness and given him a chance to make things right. Marcus had used his privilege to open doors for Danny that might otherwise have remained closed forever, and both of them had learned that the most important thing about music or about life was not impressing other people or making money. It was about touching hearts, bringing joy, and helping others discover the best parts of themselves. Years later, when Danny became one of the most famous pianists in the world, he would always remember that everything started with a cruel joke that became an act of kindness. And Marcus would remember that sometimes the most important lessons come from the people you least expect to teach you anything. The foundation they started together would help thousands of children from poor families learn to play music. Concert halls around the world would feature young performers who had been given chances they might never have had otherwise. But on this night, as Danny's first major triumph came to an end, the most important thing was simply the friendship between a boy who had dreamed of playing piano and a man who had learned to dream of being better than he was.